The verse that I recited is a lengthy verse from Surah Araf, ayat number 157. An ayat which begins by introducing the Prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and asking and telling and giving a prophecy that those who follow this Nabi, who's a Rasul, who's Ummi, alladhi yajidunahu, that you find the dhikr of his maktub written in books like Tawrat and Injil. It says those who follow the apostle, the untaught prophet. So be careful how you translate the word Ummi. Some people translate the word Ummi as illiterate. Rather, it is inappropriate to call someone who's there to educate mankind to be illiterate. Rather, Ummi is translated best as untaught, meaning someone who was not taught in any institution in this world. Yes, he never attended a maktab or a maktaba or a school or any college, but yet he was untaught by the world, but he was given ilm ladunni from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the way of explaining the word ummi, that who is Rasul? Rasulil ummi, meaning untaught. No one in the world has the capacity to teach anything to the one who's been bestowed knowledge by none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Rasulullah says, Ma ana biqari, that I am not, that when Jibreel asks him, Iqra, Rasulullah responds by saying, what should I read? Not the question that I don't know how to read. What should I read? Tell me what to read. And then Jibreel responds by saying, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Rabb, the one who has created you. So from this aspect we understand the meaning of the word ummi over here. Those who follow. And look at the instruction of Quran. Well, the instruction of Quran in this particular ayah, الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الرَّسُولَ الْأُمِّي. Let me translate this in the popular way. Those who follow the apostle, the illiterate one. Does that make sense? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us those who follow the apostle who's illiterate, who doesn't know anything himself, who's not educated. Now that is not what the question is. He's untaught, meaning nobody taught him in this world. Who's mentioned they find written with them in Torah and in the Injil, who bids them to do what is right and forbids them to do what is wrong, and makes lawful to them all the good things and forbids them all the vicious things, and relieves them. This is the point for which I recited this ayah. That it says, وَيَضَعَ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالِ, that he is someone who relieves them of their burdens and the shackles that were upon them. One of the purposes of our Prophet, that he was sent to this world, of course to educate mankind, of course to teach them the tilawat of Quran, of course the ayat of Surah Jumma that we will recite, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. Those are the duties of Rasulullah. But another one of the duties underneath that is to bring people out of this subjugation, bring people out of the slavery, and give them that maqam of freedom, that bring them and make them to be azad. That's what this ayah says. وَيَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالِ. These people were carrying these burdens upon themselves. They were in these shackles, whether physical or in immaterial way. People were, under this sort of, if you want to call it oppression. They were under siege. There were higher powers. There were people that were controlling them. Every single word that they would say, every single move that they would make, there was someone who was controlling it. In Urdu we say Katputli. Someone else has the command in their hands. Someone else is the one who's calling the shots. They are just the spokesperson. So either you could be a slave in the physical manner, or you could be a slave mindfully as well. What we find today in the society is that you may not see people who are slaves in the physical manner, that they have a master upon them and they're the slaves of those masters, but you do see how people are slaves through their mind and how they're controlled by other powers. And I'll give you an example of that. Freedom is there to do what? Is there to unite people and not disunite, and not start hating one another. Freedom comes to do what? To unite people. That's what the freedom means. But of course, if this freedom is something which is not controlled, then what does it lead to? It could sometimes lead to oppression. It could sometimes lead to, disharmony and disunity in the society. To give an example in the past, that someone goes out and makes fun of the Prophet of Islam. Now you say, well, that's out of freedom of expression. True. You have this blatant law that it is freedom of expression. But the same person, if he criticizes something which goes against your national security, right away, that freedom of expression is no longer existent. That freedom of expression does not exist when it comes to the national security. That freedom of expression, let me forget. National security, we all are aligned on it. But there are other issues that the moment you speak against the state of Israel, you're labeled as anti-Semitic. Right away, your freedom of expression is taken away. Oh, you should not talk about these things. Why? Then you are anti-Semite. Right away, what happened to that freedom of expression that you had given to me, or you had given to that person who was poking and making fun and mocking the leader of the Muslim Ummah, who's followed and beloved by more than 1.6 billion people in the world. So it's okay to undermine the emotions of 1.6 billion people in the world in the name of freedom of expression, but it's not okay the other way around. So these double standards as far as the freedom of expression exists are all there. Freedom comes to do what? To unite people, not to go ahead and cause further disunity and discord. I want to bring you back. October 7th, the National Security Council spokesperson Adrienne Watson stated that the U.S. unequivocally condemns the unprovoked attacks by Hamas terrorists against Israeli civilians, unquote. Every one of us must stand up and denounce the killing of every civilian, Israeli or Palestinian or otherwise. But Watson's words, use of the word unprovoked is doing a lot of work over here. That's all the key was. His statement went out, the very first thing from the State Department, saying what? Unprovoked actions. That keyword is what? Unprovoked. You gotta pay attention to how the media works. We said that today you might not find people who are slaves of a master who's controlling their actions, but definitely controlling what they say. And that's what the media is all about. I'm no expert in it, but I'm just putting things together in front of you and bringing about a conclusion. What exactly counts as provocation? You explain to me. What is provocation? Why did he say unprovoked actions? And what is provocation? And this word went out. Millions around the world heard this word and they followed it. Especially those who only listen to the US media. Right? They only listen to the US media and they don't listen to anyone else. They now know that these were all unprovoked actions. And hence, they start believing in it. What exactly counts as provocation? Not apparently the large number of settlers, more than 800 by one media account, who stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound on October 5th, 2 days prior to all this. Not the 248 Palestinians that were killed by Israeli forces or the settlers between January 1st and October 4th. There's no provocation over there. Not the denial of Palestinian human rights and the national aspirations for decades, 75 years and counting. What do you call provocation? This word unprovoked really set the tone. People started believing in this death tone. So we see one can in fact must see such actions as provocations without endorsing further murderous violence against civilians. And that's what's been happening. We've lost count. Over 60 days of war, we've lost count as to how many lives have been taken. But if you watch only US news, as I said, you would be likely to presume that Palestinians always act while Israel only reacts. You might even think that Palestinians are the ones colonizing the land of Israel, no less. And you probably believe that Israel, which holds ultimate control over the lives of 5 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and yet denies them the right to vote in Israeli elections. It's a democracy. It's a democracy. There's this nagging hypocrisy that exists at every level, especially the war in Ukraine. So many around the world support Ukraine's resistance to foreign occupation, as they should, but blithely deny Palestinians any way to resist their occupation. Even non-violent methods of resistance like the boycott, divestment, and sanction campaign is vilified and even criminalized. Just recently, a law was passed. I don't want to go into depth and details of it as to what it does, that to what extent you're allowed to even protest. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So that brings me back to my initial point, freedom of speech. If you walk into a funeral and start insulting the person who is being buried, as you all, take part in funerals, that happens all the time in front of us. And that is the biggest wake-up call for all of us, that we are headed in the same direction. If you need another wake-up call and you're waiting for another wake-up call, then keep waiting. The death that happens and you take part in the funeral services and then you go to the qabristan for the burial, that is as big as it gets. So if you walk into a funeral and start insulting the person who is being buried, who happens to be the mother or a father of those who are present over there, then the law says you have the right to say whatever you want to. Under the law of freedom of expression, I can express whatever I want. Nobody's gonna go ahead and challenge me. If a family has a special need child, you can start making fun of this child under the name of freedom of speech. This child is, disturbing. This child is uncontrollable. This child is this. And you start labeling him names until they tell him, well, he's special need. That's how he's going to act. You can say, well, I have freedom of speech. Under the banner of freedom of expression, when it starts to question Holocaust, where millions of Jews were killed, and it starts depicting the deceased and mocking them, how would humans in general and Jews in particular will feel about that? As it has happened, there's no denial of that. One of the main duties of every prophet was to liberate mankind from being a slave of others and from other forms of slavery. Islam came especially to remove this israhum wal ighlal, as the ayat that I quoted for you, 157 in Surah Al-Araf. This ighlal and israhum, that was the shackles that they were in, that Islam came to open them up. Now used a unique method to end slavery, to abolish it gradually, so that it sticks. Otherwise, it would have been too dramatic. Freedom, one of the most important traits found in insan kamil, a perfect being. In other words, it's a trait which is not materialistic. Those who have the smallest amount of humanity in them will prefer to be hungry, without clothing, without resources, and spend their entire life in turmoil for the cost of freedom. Hey, as long as I'm free, and there's no one qabiz upon me, I don't care about if I don't have the fancy clothes. I don't care if I don't have the fancy cars. I don't care if I don't have the fancy living style, as long as I'm free. But if freedom is going to be stripped away and I'm given all the luxuries of the world, then I'm not the follower of that Rasul Akram Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa.
Allah.
To whom Quraysh approached and said, what? That will give you, a rank in the tribe of Quraysh. We'll make you a leader. We'll give you the best of the properties. You can choose any women in the society. You can do all of this stuff, but let go of the speech that you're propagating. What did Rasulullah respond by saying? You all know. We learned this from a very young age. If you put sun on my right hand and moon on my left hand, meaning you can't do that. You can't put sun on one's right hand, literally speaking. You can't put moon on one's left hand, literally speaking. But if you were to somehow do that, or put something equivalent to that, I will still not refrain from speaking about haqq and truth. So we are the followers of such an individual. So with that said, you would live and you would not give up anything for the cause of our freedom. Mankind is willing to undertake difficulties in order to be what? In order to be free and not be slave of another. Imagine being in prison for life and then having an opportunity to leave the prison for a price. You say, well, I spent my entire life in prison, I'll spend a little bit more time. But to have a cost associated with it, to sell my principles, no, this is not going to happen. It's a trait everyone holds dear, but has different understanding of it. In Islam, freedom means being free from everyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what freedom is. So, well, then you're really stripping our freedom away. Whatever happened to freedom? If we have to be slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no, being the slave of Allah is completely in line being free in this world. Remember Bishr Hafi? Seventh Imam walks by his house, hears the sound of music. He stops by, knocks on the door. A Kaniz comes out, Imam says, whose house is this? This so and so. Imam said, is he a free man or is he a slave? He said, no, he's a free man. Imam responded, I wish he was a slave. And then Imam walked away. Kaniz returned. The master said, what happened? He said, this man stopped by when you asked this question. And he said, the last thing that he said, what I wish your master was a slave. Bishr Hafi understood. Hafi means barefoot. He ran barefoot after Imam Kamil. He said, oh Imam, I understood that you meant that you wish that I was slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning the limits, the boundaries that God has set for me, I wish that I would be restricting myself. Our relationship with the world, the wealth, nations, and the status of children are all obstacles in the path of freedom. Our captivity in front of desires and materialism is a sign of weakness of our will and conviction. And that's why Mawla Muttaqiyan, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi he said, Allah, there's so many words of wisdom by Amir al-Mu'mineen regarding this dunya. You've heard of it. But I think this caps and encapsulates the gist of all of those. Imam said, Ala burrun yada'u hadhihi al-lumada لأهلها إنه ليس لأنفسكم ثمن إلا الجنة فلا تبيعوها إلا. He said, is there no free man who can leave this chewed up morsel of the world? Chewed up morsel. You know, this world Imam is comparing with, you know, that morsel that you put in your mouth, and you chew it, and you don't like it, and you spit it out. Nobody wants to touch it. That belongs in the garbage. Imam said, that's how I perceive this dunya. Oh. Isn't there a free man who can leave this chewed up morsel of the world to those who like it? Certainly the only price for your nafs is what? Is jannat. Do not sell your nafs for anything less than this jannat. Therefore, life spent with hereafter in perspective is a life of freedom, is a life which is well spent. Real life is not one which is spent with good deeds. Practical life is not temporal or spatial. As they say in Farsi, Umar amali, na umar zamani. Meaning what? Your life should be amali, practical. Not just that you live for 60 years, 80 years, 100 years, 200 years. Life which is filled with actions. And therefore, there are many riwayat in this reference from the leader of the freedom, the leader of the free people, who other than Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam al-Hussein ibn Ali, Imam said, indeed this world has changed. You have turned away from the righteousness. Nothing is left from it, maybe some in the very bottom, like the water which remains after someone has drank in the bottom of a vessel, which is thrown away, and the like of the grass which has been eaten, life is inferior. This is the comparison, and therefore do not sell your freedom for anything. We need to be cognizant of the fact that how media delivers things to us, and and how there are double standards all around us. When it comes to especially the news which is filtered out, mu'min is kayyis. The Prophet said, al-mu'min kayyis. So mu'min is what? Sharp, smart. I don't want to use the word cunning, but that's what it literally means. Mu'min is smart and should not be gullible when it comes to how things are portrayed. Unfortunately, many of us fall victim to sometimes things that are being portrayed on the media and saying and start blaming our own, that we should not be doing this and we should not be doing this, rather looking and pointing fingers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and ability to be able to follow the commands and teachings of Ahl-e-Bait alayhi salatu wassalam. Inna asal hadith wa ablaghahum ila liqa Allah wa billahi min shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr.